Well, this panel is going to be more of crystal gazing and not so, because most of the things that we are going to discuss here don't have the sort of evidence that you heard of yesterday. Yesterday was a very exciting time for ovarian cancer. It seems like things will improve for endometrial cancer, and we are somewhere at a stalemate as far as cervical cancer is concerned after the approval of bevacizumab. So let's see, look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. You've heard all these presentations before, and they mainly related to these topics. So we will be discussing these topics with the panel. The first one being platinum re-challenge, the other one being hormonal therapy, whether that can be used in patients with advanced endometrial cancer, and who should be actually considered for this therapy. Then, of course, the multi-targeted therapies like pazopanib. What are the predictors of response to immune checkpoint inhibitors? And given the data, where would you use them? And then, of course, advanced cervical cancer and immune checkpoint inhibitors. So let's begin with the first slide. Let me start from this side. That how would you treat a case of advanced endometrial cancer? You know what topics we are covering, so you give your, before we come to those topics and discussion of each therapy, let's see what your replies are for this.
The standard of care for advanced endometrial cancer as of date would be include Taxol, a platinum agent, and with or without without an anthracycline.
Yeah. Anybody would like to say something different? What about hormonal therapies? Do you ever consider hormonal therapies in your
factors I would consider before putting the patient on? Age, performance status, and the comorbidities. If a patient of 65, 70-year-old lady comes with a poor performance status, I may not even consider a chemotherapy. Responses are going to be bad. So irrespective of the ERPR status, I go for the hormonal therapy. That's what has been the practice. A patient who's fit for chemo will first give the chemotherapy. That's been the practice.
What about you?
I will also like to keep in mind the pace of the disease. If it's relatively small duration, prefer chemotherapy. Relatively slow growing disease, may consider to give a hormonal option.
Yeah. Anyone else?
First line, if possible, chemotherapy always.
Yeah.
And the standard is paclitaxel. Adriamycin adds to the toxicity. That is what the GOG trial has said. Nearly giving the same results.
Dr. Sandeep?
I think ERPR would be surely considered if the volume of the disease not much. Patient is, even though patient is fit, ERPR strongly positive, can still consider hormonal therapy first. Otherwise, chemo with paclitaxel, carboplatin base.
You'd like to say something?
The response with chemotherapy is much better than with hormone therapy. So if patient is fit for chemotherapy, first preference will be chemotherapy only. Hormone therapy doesn't give such good results as chemotherapy gives. So my first preference for fit patients is chemotherapy.
There I would little disagree. The hormone therapy in endometrial cancer in some of the patients is fantastic.
Yes.
So I think we should not undermine this treatment in patients. I have seen patients with liver metastasis, lung metastasis going for at least 7-8 months and with an excellent quality of life. If you start exploring this, I think you will find it as a very good tool. So it's a useful tool. We should not just...
You want to say something?
I think I'll agree with Ranga, and I would draw an analogy from carcinoma breast. So, there we make a choice between hormonal manipulation and chemotherapy. I would look at it the same way.
So I think to this, yes, anybody wants to say something in the audience?
So, Dr. Rangarav, if I got you rightly, you said regardless ERPR status, you will give hormonal therapy. So I just want to ask panelists, do you all of you practice the same thing, or you rely on ERPR status and will give to only?
See, actually, I have data. I'll be showing it in subsequent slides. But before I show that, let me get the view of the panelists to this question.
And then since you also had the pazopanib is one of the things, I must share the experience of one patient who's done wonderfully well for at least 1 year with pazopanib. She was chemo refractory, hormone refractory, and single agent pazopanib she did for 1 year very well. It was just an exploratory treatment. I think these are all the things which have got a place in these metastatic patients.
We say reflex the ERPR, but in in endometrial cancer, it's PR which is more important than ER. And if PR
The
expression
question is regardless of ER, PR
regardless,
status, will you
first
give
line-
hormonal therapy or no?
first line, I don't.
I'll
Come
show
to
you
that
the
point.
slide just to give you a reply to that. Most of the studies which have been done on hormonal therapy have not selected patients on the basis of ER/PR. And what they have shown is if the ER/PR is negative, the response rates are around 8 to 9%. I mean, whether that is because, there may be some cells which are actually ER/PR positive but not picked up. But that is and of course, if they are positive, then the response rates are much higher. So that is where, so if you were to get a patient who is not suitable for chemotherapy but is, ER/PR negative, I think you won't just give up. You would consider that patient and give hormonal therapy. 8 to 9% is the reported response rate in patients who are ER/PR negative.
Between hormonal versus chemotherapy, small volume disease in an otherwise healthy patient, would you consider doing ER/PR before deciding whether to give hormonal treatment upfront or give chemotherapy?
Yes. Anybody wants to take the question?
So if you're saying a young patient who's fit for chemotherapy, I would consider chemotherapy first, irrespective of the volume of the disease. I may not, just because she's very well to do, I will not like to consider hormonal therapy depending on the thing. That's not been the practice. If some paper or some guidelines recommend that, that is different.
Standard of care is always first line chemo. It's all over. There is no question. The
See,
first line treatment always has been chemotherapy in a metastatic setup.
We have actually couple of cases, well differentiated cases, which
Whatever it
relapse,
is.
relapse after maybe 15, 20 years and limited disease. We have, experience with hormone only treatment. We don't give chemotherapy to these patients.
Hormonal therapy
But
will be like
receptor
this
positive.
only. It will go on and on and on. The response rates will be longer and longer. Chemotherapy you give, till that time the responses are there and it will relapse, usually.
So just want
Here,
to...
The
yes,
ethical
anybody
issue
else
comes
wants-
in a patient like this. You're saying after 15 years relapse, when you offer them the hormonal therapy, we don't have a rationale today to say that, okay, hormonal therapy is going to be effective. Only in case she's sick or she doesn't want chemotherapy, then I would consider.
So I just want to ask the...
Excuse me. Ma'am, if it's a operable disease or something like a recurrence after 15 years or something.
Yeah. There is no data really which is comparing hormonal therapy with chemotherapy. In breast cancer, we've got large data sets where they show that patients who are ER/PR strongly positive, the type you say, well differentiated, long disease control, we know in breast cancer that they do not respond well to chemotherapy. Now, we don't have such data as far as endometrial cancer is concerned. So, if you were to draw an analogy from, other hormone responsive tumors, then of course, hormone therapy could be a valid option for these selected patients that you are mentioning, that who are ER/PR positive, well differentiated, grade 1, grade 2 tumor, long control there. But as I said, there is no evidence as such today to say that, chemotherapy doesn't work in those patients like we have in breast cancer. Yeah. So, anyone wants to add? Anybody from the audience has any experience they would like to share?
Just want to say that...
Yeah, Jaya, I can't see you, but I can recognize your
Okay.
voice.
So I just wanted to ask, as Dr. Amita mentioned, not even 15, but maybe somebody who relapses after 2 years, has a grade 2 endometrioid and has just, say, a few lung nodules. I do not, even if she's fit, some of them, of course, there is no randomized data to that, but what I would want to put them on hormone therapy, and versus somebody who is has relapse stage, as already mentioned, within the next 3 months. Therefore, definitely, even if they are ER/PR positive, would want to put them on chemotherapy. I don't know whether we should use, somebody who's a serous histology, whether they would do better with hormone or chemo, but I would first want to put them on chemotherapy.
Since you brought up that point, it would come later on that the serous histology doesn't respond well to hormone therapy. So the histologic subtype would definitely be a criteria for selecting. She mentioned endometrioid, grade 1, grade 2, well differentiated. So that's what.
What Jaya is saying is practice our center because that's the practice here.
I think Dr. Tiwari is not here in the audience. Dr. Pratt, I know you're the pathologist, but can I ask you, at your center, what do your clinicians favor in this given situation that Amita Maheshwari mentioned?
Positive endometrial cancer at relapse, limited disease, will you give hormonal treatment or chemotherapy, or you have no clue? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, let's see some of the data here. Now, the second question, which option would you select? You already mentioned about the chemotherapy part. You brought up the point of adriamycin, and of course, there was that non-inferiority study which was published in 2012 and which showed that paclitaxel carboplatin is non-inferior to the triplet combination, and it only the triplet adds to the toxicity. So paclitaxel carboplatin is standard of care. But of course, as I'll be showing, you can see that this was the important study, though retrospective, which was presented, that re-challenge with platinum study, that the combination of platinum with a drug was better than the non-platinum drugs. So this is what it is. Now I want to ask you, do you think that concept of platinum sensitivity can also be considered in endometrial carcinoma? Anyone?
I'll strongly tend to think like that, like in ovarian cancer.
Yeah. Anyone else? Well, there is data on that, and you can see this is the data. This is that 25% is the response rate if it is less than 6 months. This is endometrial cancer. 6 to 12 months is 38%, and as you go to more than 24 months, it's almost 65%. And you can see that if the platinum-free interval is less than 12 months, then the PFS is around 4.4 months, and more than 12 months, 10.3 months. So, that is where it stands. Yes, Dr. Bowman?
This indirectly tells us that any hormonal therapy you will use will not be able to give a response more than 20-25%, even after 2 years, 3 years, if it recurs. So this indirectly tells us chemotherapy.
Yeah, but we cannot make such cross trials.
I agree, that I agree.
Because this patient population.
But when we do not have a randomized trial, what else to do?
Yeah.
We have to compare something like that.
Yeah.
Or we do a randomized trial and tell the world.
Okay. Now, sometimes they may be platinum resistant or less than 6 months, but if you look at the data on single agent, the response rates are extremely poor. So I think using any other agents is, so if you had there, the choice of hormonal therapy, you would go for that. So apart from platinum, the others have a very dismal response rates. And in future, of course, nowadays you see very few new drugs being introduced, but this is one place where a phase 3 study is on, where you have a doxorubicin conjugate, and it's with a luteinizing hormone, releasing hormone, because there are receptors for this on the endometrium. Well, we'll await and see the results of this study. Now, coming to the question of hormonal therapy. Now, you know that you have a lot of options in hormonal therapy. All of you have mentioned about hormonal therapy. Can you tell me, like, you've got, the progestins, you have tamoxifen, then you have now the aromatase inhibitors, which is letrozole, then you have everolimus, which is an mTOR inhibitor, and actually used in breast cancer to circumvent the resistance to hormone therapy. So with all these available, what would be your choice? Because if you're going to wait for data, you're not going to get it. So these are all phase 2 studies. So what would you choose?
The GOG standard of care is to alternate tamoxifen with progesterone, with medroxyprogesterone. That is the standard of care by the GOG trial.
Can you tell me what is the reason, rationale for that?
The rationale is, as I told you earlier, PR is more important in endometrial cancer than ER. And what happens when we give tamoxifen, the PR expression goes up. At the same time, then you give medroxyprogesterone, then the PR expression goes down. Then again you give tamoxifen, again the PR expression goes up. So the standard of care is still that. But I do not know how many people follow this in the crowd. Any medical oncologist? First line hormonal therapy.
Okay,
I follow
that.
that.
The other panelists follow this?
I think this is what the I think this is what the MSK-CC is following, and they give it 3 weekly, where they give tamoxifen 20 milligram twice a day and alternating with medroxyprogesterone acetate 80 milligrams per day. But the response rates may not be very durable, and we have to probably yet define the population which is going to really accept this.
Anyone else using a combination? Can you tell me your preference if you, I mean, just tell us your preferences for the type of hormonal therapy you
I
would
prefer
use.
progesterone agents than tamoxifen.
Yeah. Dr. Sandeep,
Yes, same either progesterone agents or aromatase inhibitors.
anybody else would like to say?
Actually, Dr. Sudeep sir has started one patient of mine on fulvestrant plus everolimus, and she's doing reasonably well since last 9 or 10 months.
Yeah. So, this is a phase 2 study again presented at the abstract form right now. And you can see that this is a combination of letrozole, everolimus and metformin. Now, if anyone can tell me that how does metformin come into the picture in this study?
Actually, they have found that endometrial cancer, as it is a risk factor, being diabetic and hypertensive is a risk factor. And they found that probably when we are using metformin, one of its non-diabetic actions would be to reduce cell proliferation. It will also increase apoptosis, and that's how it acts.
Is there some molecular marker against which it was supposed to act, but of course the studies didn't bear out? Anybody?
Yeah, probably on the KRAS, it has anti-KRAS action.
I think there have been some combinations with metformin and chemotherapy, oral chemotherapy in the other cancers, especially the breast cancers. But I'm not able to understand the logic of combining all these 3 things. Letrozole, everolimus is understandable, coming from the breast cancer.
I'll come to that.
Yeah, again here I would not be combining letrozole and everolimus as the first line, because when you use letrozole and the mTOR pathway starts getting activated, then I would have added everolimus, not in the first step.
I would just like to tell you, they've done a study on, and I'll show you that, on endometrial cancer, and they have seen that the PTEN loss and also the PI3KC pathway, there are mutations in that.
There are crosstalks
yes.
between these
So
two.
that is why, they're so predominant in newly diagnosed cases that, I think this is an upfront treatment. These were not previously treated on hormone therapy. So this data is on patients who have not been exposed to hormone therapy. So you can see the clinical benefit rate, which includes the partial response and stable disease, 66.7%. And you can see 7 patients are more than 14 cycles. So it's quite a promising way to go. And so this we have already dealt with. Now this is just to show you the data, and if you cannot see the whole slide, just to summarize it, that the median overall survival with the progestins and tamoxifen is around 8.1 months. Many trials have not selected patients based on their ER/PR status. If ER/PR is negative, then the response rates are around 8 to 9%, and of course it's better in those patients who are hormone receptor positive. And this is the phase 2 study which was carried out by the same author of the previous publication of letrozole plus everolimus. Letrozole alone was showing around response rates of 9.4% and 6.7 months. But then, just to show you, that letrozole and everolimus showed almost a response rate of 32% and progression-free survival. And this is why the metformin came in, because patients in this study who were receiving metformin had a clinical benefit or response rate of almost 56%. And that is why they decided to pursue this particular trial of adding metformin. So there was no other rationale except this. Now going back a bit, what is the rationale for mTOR inhibition? I think all the medical oncologists know, but if you'd just like to tell for the students in the audience and all, what is the rationale for mTOR inhibition? Anyone?
I think this is the pathway that the cell takes to overcome when you block certain pathways. So like you mentioned, in endometrium, the loss of PTEN, which is tumor suppressor gene, that itself shows that the mTOR pathway gets activated.
Yeah.
So I think that's a rationale.
Yeah. Now, these are all the mTOR inhibitors in this study which have been looked at. And if again to summarize this slide, you can see that if you use the mTOR inhibitors alone, temsirolimus is one of the ones which has been used, and then everolimus, and there is a lot of data coming on one of the drugs not available in India, that is ridaforolimus, and you can see the response rate is modest, better in first line, meaningful disease stabilization is seen. There are a lot of case reports where on mTOR inhibition alone, patients have been controlled for long duration, but these are all case reports. Then response is seen both in serous and endometrioid, though of course more so in endometrioid. The PIK3CA mutations and deletion PTEN, the rationale for actually using them do not predict for response. And they have tried combination with hormonal therapies just shown before, which is promising. Combination with cytotoxics has been too toxic, so it should not be combined with that. And there are some studies looking at combination with bevacizumab, but those results are awaited. So now you come to the third presentation on pazopanib, which is a multi-targeted kinase inhibitor, but basically its mode of action is anti-angiogenic. And you know what the results were. And if you look at all these drugs, what is your take on these drugs alone? You, Dr. Rangara, you already mentioned one case you had put on pazopanib. So any of the other panelists use these in their practice or have had an experience with that?
Experience of ovarian cancer where we had used pazopanib,
Yes.
but not much.
In endometrial, anybody in the audience?
One patient of mine was put on irinotecan plus Avastin, now in CR, on maintenance Avastin since last 3 or 4 months.
What is the histology?
It was endometrial adenoma.
So you can see that this is the take-home message for anti-angiogenic agents, that the response rates are around 8 to 18%. The progression-free survival at 6 months is around 30 to 40%. There is no anti-angiogenic agent approved for endometrial carcinoma, FDA approved. And there are studies going on looking at bevacizumab in combination with chemotherapy, but we don't have the results as yet. The accrual has been completed. Now, coming to the last
Point on
presentation.
bevacizumab, there is a large, phase 2 trials have shown bevacizumab with chemotherapy has good results in endometrial carcinoma. And this is, I feel, evolution. Like how in cervical cancers, there are large phase 2 studies which showed, till our Dr. Tiwari did a phase 3 randomized trial and he showed. So I'm sure there is some role of bevacizumab in endometrial carcinoma, unless one does, because there is no large phase 3 randomized trial which I could go through for bevacizumab with chemotherapy in endometrial. Maybe there is some role.
At onset rather than
Yes, absolutely.
The patient was who I had kept on irinotecan plus Avastin.
Is
She has
serous
progressed
or
on.
endometrial?
She was serous. She had progressed on carbotaxol, then Adria-based, and then this was the third line.
Yeah, so these are all reports, and but you know, as I mentioned, 2 trials have already completed accrual. So maybe by the end of this year or next year, we would have the data on this. So at the moment, they are not to be used outside the setting of a clinical trial, but there are exceptions, like you have mentioned, who has not responded to anything, then you could think of using it. Now coming to the checkpoint inhibitors, and this was the data which was presented here just now by the previous speaker, and you can see that the partial response rates are around 13%, and the SD stable disease is 13%. So, and the toxicity, I mean, it's well tolerated. We all know, and these inhibitors have been discussed yesterday as well. So that is why I'm not going into details of mechanism of action and all that. But they're quite well tolerated. Now, what is your take on checkpoint inhibition in gynec malignancies? Now, I'm not just alluding to these 2 abstracts.
This 13% is heavily pre-treated patients. This is what we are seeing.
Yes.
Not like what we saw in letrozole
Yes.
upfront patients. That, just to
Yeah.
make it clear. This was multiply treated,
So
platinum
they-
resistant,
so they have
failed
lot of
multiple
prior
lines.
therapies. Yes, yes. Anybody would like to comment on, have they used it in any gynec malignancies?
I've also not used any of the checkpoint in gynae, ovarian survival, but we feel that in cervical cancer, endometrial cancer, apart from chemotherapy, we've been using the targeted agents and also the different agents. I think there is a definite role of these. It's worth trying.
Yeah.
Probably squamous
Anybody
cell
in the
carcinoma
audience,
cervix.
any medical oncologists have used these in any gynec malignancy? So, well, it should not be used at the moment, these checkpoint inhibitors in any gynec malignancies, because the data are not mature. But let us see what is the rationale. Like, if you actually look at each disease, then you will see that endometrial carcinoma comes out on top almost, because of certain reasons. And that is that Dr. Pratt gave a beautiful lecture on the molecular subtypes, and I think the ultra mutated and the hyper mutated subtypes are very likely to be more amenable to this because of high mutation load and large number of neoantigens and infiltration by TILs, as was shown by the previous speaker. So these are the subgroups where one could look at. And of course, the MSI, the microsatellite instability group, and the pole mutated, again having high expression of PD1 and PDL1. So maybe these are the subgroups which may be more amenable. And this is just to show you what Dr. Pratt had already shown you, the different types, and how now you have certain surrogates which can be used to actually define these subgroups. So, and this is about cervical cancer. So I think with this, the take-home messages are that platinum re-challenge is possible. Hormonal therapy has promising results. Endometrioid and low grade are the ones who are more likely to respond. Use of mTOR inhibitor is under investigation, but as I said, that it's going to take a long time to have a phase 3 study. So I think given the good results that we have seen, one could consider the use of everolimus, letrozole as one of the options, hormonal options. But of course, we are well aware of the side effects of everolimus, so it's not as easy to give as all the hormonal therapies. Though it's only a tablet, it has a lot of side effects, and you need to know how to handle the drug. And of course, as I said, that checkpoint inhibitors need further data. Anyone would like to add to this now?
Sir, I have got a question, madam. Majority of the panelists agreed that in recurrent endometrial cancer scenario, we have to first go for chemotherapy. Am I correct? Yeah. Then after the chemotherapy, 6 courses or whatever, should we start with the adjuvant hormone therapy, or should we wait, try multiple schedules of chemotherapy, then only for the progressive disease we start
no.
it?
If the response is good, I think so there is no role.
No, again progressive disease after 6 months, again relapse, again chemotherapy, you would prefer chemotherapy, or?
Even UpToDate says that there is no role of continuation. Even UpToDate or any other, they have never shown any role of continuing chemotherapy and continuing hormonal therapy after chemotherapy.
That is adjuvant. Soon
Yeah,
after
something
chemotherapy,
like so
there is no role. So we have to wait for
we call it pseudo-adjuvant, really.
multiple
This is not adjuvant.
Yeah.
schedules of multiple chemotherapy, then progressive disease. That time only the role of hormone therapy comes.
Yeah. I must tell you one thing, madam. There is one thing what the literature say, and we talk in these halls. The other thing is when you're sitting in the clinic. Sometimes I do what you say, that the patients who are responding well and then they are doing well with the chemotherapy come to a stable or a good response, and then there's some minimal residual disease or a good CR, we try to maintain them. Because they're going to otherwise leave them alone, they will come back.
Maintain them on?
Maintain them on either some kind of a low-dose chemo or hormonal agents. I mean, this is off-the-label indication. So let us not take a message that this is a standard literature-based or evidence-based recommendation. That's not. That's totally a clinical practice, and this is only done after discussion with the patient. That's not a standard of care.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, right. But to have them as a maintenance therapy. But one can defend, but we tend to do it rather than not. We tend to do it.
Yeah, because
No, it's not done.
I have a question.
yeah, so I think hormonal therapy is a underused, potentially useful treatment for endometrial cancer. The question is you need to identify the patients correctly. Now, the situation that you were saying, I understand that with chemotherapy, you hardly ever get complete responses. Most of the time, they are partial responses. So you have a good partial response, and then the patient wants something, and then you break your head trying to think what to do. Whatever you do after a partial response to maintain is off-label. There is no guideline to really guide you. Now, if that patient has a very aggressive disease, even if you were to give hormones or you were to give a second-line chemo, it's not going to help. And there is no role for maintaining the chemo just because the patient has had a partial response. So that is the status.
Hormone, and just the disease melted away, and this continued for 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Receptor.
This must
we
be
could not do
endometrioid
the
receptor
receptor
positive.
because it is a 10 year back the surgery was done, and she was treated with stage 3 disease, treated with chemotherapy and radiation. After 5 years she recurred, and that time chemo given. Then she responded again after 6 months. Progressive disease, another schedule given. Then with the progressive disease, she was started on progesterone. So that is maintained for, now again she has come with a disease.
So breast cancer, yes. In breast cancer, yes, it is.
But this is in
endometrium, there is no data to do like that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is regarding the subtypes. The one thing which we didn't discuss is 5 to 7% of endometrial cancers, especially the serous ones, have HER2 amplification. So does anyone have experience with using trastuzumab in endometrial cancer?
Well, there's
Or
no
at least
study
checking
in
her to-
progress.
No,
as
I
far
know,
as
but-
I know, because I've looked it up.
Shall I-
There's no study in progress.
I don't have my personal experience, but I know one patient who's been treated. The results weren't very good. I mean, it doesn't work the way it works in the breast cancer.
So do we check at least, but HER2, especially in the serous like
We
where
don't
you
as
have
not as a
P53?
routine. We don't do as a routine.
I'll tell you what the literature says. I have never used. The results are dismal on Herceptin, but newer pertuzumab has got some good results. So what people are started using in these subgroup of patients, there are trials of pertuzumab, which is somehow because pertuzumab is a HER3, and HER3 is more exposed in endometrium. So this is a drug molecule for the future, pertuzumab.
Even HER1 blockade or EGFR blockade is even response rates are better than the HER2 blockade, which are around 13% with trastuzumab, and they with erlotinib they are as much as 14 to 16%.
Any other questions? Well, then,
Like say, metformin, I mean, there's no clear-cut doses of hormonal therapy mentioned.
it's letrozole is like 2.5 milligram,
Standard.
everolimus 10 milligram, and then
Like
of
say
course metformin is 500 per
which
day.
is not commonly used. The dose is not.
Magistral acetate dosage.
80 BD.
Yeah, yeah,
160 milligram
160 per day.
per day. Yeah.
Any other questions? Then I would like to thank my panelists and the audience for the interaction, and thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to discuss something which really we don't have very solid data on.